My father, a park ranger, once took me with him on his night shift, something I regret not preparing for. He always had rules when we worked in the forest, but I never took them seriously. It's easy to ignore warnings in a place that seems calm and peaceful, like a national park, but forests have a way of showing their darker side. Silence in the forest isn't peaceful. It's a warning. At first, I didn't understand my father's love for the forest. I thought it was boring and full of annoying insects, but over time, as I got older, I started to appreciate the thrill of it. When my father invited me to join him for a night shift, I accepted, hoping it might help repair our strained relationship. We arrived at the park at 9 p.m., and after an hour-and-a-half drive, we reached the small cabin where my father worked. It was dark and isolated. He gave me a list of rules, some of which I thought were just to scare me. The rules seemed ordinary at first. Stay on marked paths, don't leave food out, don't go alone in the park, etc. But some were stranger, like if you see a man without an arm, don't help him. Or if you hear whistling, it means the danger is near. The most unsettling rule was about dead blue, a complete silence, an unnatural state that signals danger. My father told me if that ever happened, I should leave. The night was calm at first. We chatted and spent time in the small cabin, but soon, things started to feel off. My father received a call from another ranger, Martin, about a missing person. He told me to stay in the cabin and wait for him. I was nervous but agreed, watching as he left. Hours passed in silence. Then, at around 2 am, I heard a knock on the trapdoor. It was my father's voice, calling me to open up, but something felt wrong. The voice was too insistent, and I began to worry. I called my father, who told me to stay quiet and not open the door. He said it wasn't him outside. The voice continued to knock, insisting it was my father, but I knew something was off. My father's voice was too familiar, too comforting, and the creature outside was trying to mimic it. I stayed as quiet as possible, reading the list of rules again, hoping they were just superstitions. But then I heard something moving on the roof of the cabin, and panic set in. The creature outside knocked on the window, and I saw its face bloody and twisted. My father called me again, telling me to stay put while he and Martin were on their way. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard the sound of Martin's car approaching. The creature outside turned to look, its twisted smile creeping across its face, and then it disappeared into the woods. Gunshots followed, and I felt a wave of relief. My father arrived soon after, and we were about to leave when the silence fell. The dead blue. The wind stopped, the crickets stopped. It was too quiet. I ran to the car, but as I looked back, I realized something horrifying. The man standing in front of the car wasn't my father. In a panic, I sped away, running my father over. As I stopped at a checkpoint, Martin's car pulled up, and I asked where my father was. Martin's response only added to my fear. He took an ATV to get you. At that moment, I realized the horror wasn't over yet. I used to work at a hospital. One night, I was asked to cover for a coworker, Kurt, who had to take his wife to chemo. This meant I had to handle the morgue that night, instead of my usual duties. I didn't really want to, but I didn't have a choice. When I got down there, the room felt heavy. The air was thick with a strange kind of dust. I thought it was just regular dust at first, but then I noticed something odd. Scattered on the floor were tiny beads. I knelt down to look closer and realized they weren't just beads. They were from a child's necklace or bracelet. Some of them had letters on them, but they were too burnt to read. That's when it hit me. This dust wasn't dust. It was ash. The ash of a little girl who had died in a house fire the night before. The beads must have belonged to her. I could almost feel her presence in the room, like she was watching me. I felt sick. My stomach turned, and I couldn't stay there any longer. I ran out of the morgue and spent the rest of my shift barely holding it together. At lunch, I sat alone and cried, thinking about that poor girl and her family. I didn't want to go back, but I had to finish my shift. It's been 5 years now, but I still think about that night. I've never told Kurt how I felt. Sometimes I even blame him, even though it wasn't his fault. But the memory of those burnt beads still haunts me. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. I wonder who that little girl was, and if she ever found peace. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she's still there in the morgue, waiting for someone to remember her. I want to tell you about something that happened to me 2 years ago. I'm a security guard, but not just any kind of security guard. I work the night shift at an art gallery, and I don't just protect the paintings. I protect something far more dangerous. It all started when I interviewed for the job. I remember it clearly, even though it was so long ago. I sat across from the gallery owner, Miss Amy Andrews. She was calm, composed, and her questions were strange. But I thought it was just part of the job interview. She asked me, "Are you a spiritual man, Mr. Hall?" I nodded. I wasn't sure why she was asking this. "Yes," I said, thinking she was referring to the artwork. "But I'm not an expert on philosophy or religion." Miss Andrews smiled. "That's okay. The paintings here, they tell a story. But it's not just about art. It's about something deeper." I was a bit confused, but tried not to show it. I had a solid work history as a police officer and then a security guard at an embassy, so I thought I could handle anything. "I can handle it," I said. "I've worked many solo night shifts before." She paused for a moment, studying me, then said, "This job will test you. It takes a toll on you mentally." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I brushed it off. How bad could it be? It was just a night shift in a gallery, right? Then Miss Andrews told me something that stuck with me. She said the gallery had a permanent display of her sister's artwork. Her sister, Harper Andrews, had passed away years ago after being admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Harper's artwork was strange and dark. Miss Andrews said the paintings told the story of Harper's descent into sickness, not just mental illness, but something much worse, sickness of the soul. Miss Andrews told me the paintings had to be watched carefully. If left unobserved for too long, something terrible could happen. "Just keep watch," she said. I thought she was joking, but I would soon find out she wasn't. The first hour of my shift was pretty normal. The gallery was quiet and still. The only sound was the hum of the security lights. But there was one painting that immediately caught my attention. It was a painting of a man with unnaturally long legs and white, hollow eyes. He looked like something from a nightmare. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I walked around the gallery, keeping my eyes on the paintings, like Miss Andrews had told me. One painting showed a young girl with no facial features, no eyes, no mouth, nothing but smooth skin where her face should be. It was deeply disturbing. The plaque beneath the painting read, "Harper's youth dies." It was about the loss of innocence as we age and sin. There were other paintings, too, visions of the end of the world. Cities burning, people screaming in agony, and in each one, there were creatures like the man in the first painting, horrible beings who seemed to be causing the destruction. I felt like the paintings were alive, that the screams and heat from the fires were real. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn. There was a painting of the gallery itself. The plaque read, "Prison." It said, "They entered our world, so I locked them here." At that point, I was starting to feel uneasy, but I tried to stay calm. I sat down on the sofa, my mind racing, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see a message from my wife, Kara. She was telling me about how her mom had warned her to be careful about my new job. Apparently, a friend of her mom's husband had a mental breakdown after working just one night shift at the gallery. No one knew what happened to him. Before I could process the message, I heard something. A low, muffled sound, almost like a groan. I froze. Slowly, I stood up and used my phone's flashlight to scan the gallery. Then I saw a shadow, a figure moving behind one of the walls. My heart raced. I moved towards it, and that's when I saw her. The girl from Harper's Youth Dies painting. She was walking toward me, but she looked like a twisted version of the girl in the painting. Her legs were thin and frail, and her face was just like the one in the painting, no features at all, just smooth skin. She was groaning, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but there was nothing but a soundless, horrifying cry. I backed away, terrified. But then something even worse happened. My body seemed to move on its own, and I leaned toward her. My cheek touched the empty space where her face should have been. I screamed silently, but I couldn't make a sound. And then I heard it, the voice of the ghost girl, distorted and broken. "Why did you close your eyes?" she whispered. Before I could react, my body was thrown to the ground. I scrambled to my feet and looked up. The exactor, the creature from the painting, had escaped. It was free, and it was moving. The painting was no longer just a picture. The exactor was real. Harper's voice whispered in my ear, "Find him. He's hiding." I glanced at the painting of the gallery, and there he was standing in one of the painted windows, watching me. The creature was still inside the painting, but it was so real, it was like it was standing right in front of me. I knew I had to act fast. The paintings were all around me, but the exactor was on the top floor, behind the windows of the painting of the gallery. I had to get up there, but Miss Andrews had told me not to go to the upper floor. The gallery had an area that was off limits, but I had no choice. I had to go. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding. The floor above was dim, with sheets covering the frames of paintings that hadn't been hung yet. At the far end of the room, I saw him. The exactor. The creature was crouched over one of Harper's apocalyptic paintings, its bony arms sinking into the canvas, like it was trying to become part of it. As I approached, the creature turned toward me. I froze in fear. Its eyes were white, like in the painting. It was even bigger than I had imagined. Its flesh was like a horrible, sickly version of a human body, its bones jutting out from its skin. And it was coming for me. I didn't know what to do. Then I heard Harper's voice again. "Cast it away." "How?" I screamed, barely able to breathe. The exactor lunged at me, its bony hands wrapping around my neck. I gasped, struggling to breathe. The world seemed to blur. But then, through the haze of fear, I heard Harper's voice again. She told me to keep looking at the exactor. I wasn't allowed to close my eyes, or it would escape and destroy everything. "I won't stop," I whispered, my voice shaking. The exactor screeched in pain, and suddenly, it let go. I fell to the floor, gasping for air. The creature was gone, back inside the painting, and the gallery was silent once more. The paintings were back in place, and everything seemed normal. But I knew the truth now. I couldn't stop watching. The exactor was still there, trapped in the painting. But if I closed my eyes, it would be free again. I didn't leave. I stayed, even when Miss Andrews came the next morning, expecting me to quit. I couldn't leave, not after what I'd seen. I had to keep watch. Too much was at stake.